Right. So my name's Karen. I'm from Wrongside in Manchester. And this is going into my 6th year of recording. I've not always been comfortable around insects. Most of my life I was phobic, thanks to my spider throwing brother. And also there was an incident when I was at school. I remember it very clearly. Something landed on my face. And I think
excuse me, Karen, could you just turn up your volume or talk a bit closer into the microphone, because you're quite quiet at the moment.
Is that better?
A little bit. Can you move a bit closer to it at all?
Is that better?
That's a lot better, thank you.
So I remember it quite clearly, and looking back, I think it was the reaction of the adults around me, because nothing happened. It landed on my face, and I think it was the panic in the voices of the adults. It flew away, and I think after that it just snowballed. So summers would be miserable. I was absolutely terrified of flying insects. So fast forward to around 2010, I started a vegetable gardening group at my children's school. We applied for a grant, fundraised for a shed, and it was really popular, quite successful. And another group of parents approached me to see about helping them apply for a grant for a beekeeping club. So reluctantly agreed, but as long as I didn't have to go near any bees, and it didn't turn out that way. So this was the school with the raised beds. As usually happens with these volunteer groups, people started dropping out, and I was left with a hive of bees, really phobic, but I felt like I had a responsibility to for them. Won £5,000, set up a plot. The school boarded an allotments with a gate. So the allotments donated the plot nearest to the school. We built raised beds for each classroom. We did an outdoor teaching area and a little enclosure for the bees. Did an introduction to beekeeping, still extremely terrified, but I ended up becoming the beekeeper. The chap who was supposed to be teaching me dropped out, so I was left with a hive of bees and not the first clue how to look after them. So I turned to the internet and I found a forum, the beekeeping forum, and they took me under their wing and helped me, advised me, taught me everything they knew. It was my first experience of distance learning. So I had to learn very quickly. So as I'm getting over my fear of bees, started joining lots of beekeeping groups, and I stumbled across UK Bees, Wasps and Ants. I was still not aware that there were so many solitary bees. I didn't have the first clue really about wild bees, wasps. Joined the group and I was just blown away by the knowledge of the experts, by this intriguing little world that had been right under my nose that I'd just been totally unaware of. So I started asking questions, and then go away, hoover up as much info as I could on what I'd been told, I was encouraged. I was never made to feel like I couldn't learn to identify bees. So I remember taking a photograph. I saw some tiny little insects on a flower. I took a photograph and I was convinced that there were these tiny bees that everybody else had been finding and posting. So I came along to the group, and I remember Matt Smith telling me that there were hoverflies, pipiens. And I remember thinking, oh God, he even knows hoverflies. I was blown away by the knowledge. Didn't know anybody nearby at that stage. So just had to use the resources online and teach myself. So I started getting familiar with all the different shapes and the different kinds of bees. And off I went into the world recording. So now I'm an reasonable identifier. So I go out looking for my bees into the local area. I live on a council estate about 2 miles from the city centre. Houses have quite large gardens, which range from cultivated to left to grow wild. There's 2 huge parks, so lots of little habitats and interesting places to look for bees. Urban recording is quite interesting. You're going to encounter people every time, lots of people interested, but there are also some cons that I've come across. A couple of times I've had the police called on me, probably concerned that there's a woman staring at a hole in the ground. She hasn't moved for about 10 minutes. I think she needs help, that kind of thing. That's happened frequently, actually. Lots of interest. There was one instance where I was photographing a gorgeous Vespula queen, and there was a gang of lads nearby, and they've seen me, so they came over and said, "What are you doing?" So I showed them the wasp, and one of them screamed, and it was the most high-pitched scream I've ever heard, and almost jumped into his friend's arms, which was hilarious. But they were interested, so told them a little bit about her, and they went away fascinated, and shown that you can be around these insects and they're not going to harm you. Another thing I've come across is vandalism, which is a bit discouraging. I've had sites vandalised. The first one, there was a lot of solitary wasps nesting in the back of some benches in the local park. Went round one day and they'd all been kicked off. All the backs had been kicked around. The next one was a fallen lime tree on a local allotments. I arranged with them to come and record what was used. It was very active, to come and record what was nesting in it. And every time I went back, somebody had hacked away even more at the soil. It was quite upsetting, really, because there was some really nice stuff nesting there. It was really, really active. The most upsetting piece of vandalism I found was this owl carving. I hadn't been collecting specimens long, And I walked past one day and saw that it was very active. So I went back, collected, I think 5 or 6 specimens, took them home, got round to them over the winter, and one of them was Stigmus pendulus, a new wasp for Lancashire and Greater Manchester. So I was very excited, really looking forward to going back the following year, really, studying it. Went down one day and the owl had been taken and the rest of the structure had been kicked around the park. They replaced it with it looks more like ET to me, but maybe I'm just disgruntled. But there are some good things about urban recording. I mentioned the stigmas before, lots of little habitats, different people with different styles of gardening, lots of wild spaces that are just left to rewild themselves. Not many people recording around here, if any, so it's a bit of a playground. The little Lazia Glossum there, found that 2 foot from my front door. Lazia Glossum minutissimum, so that was quite exciting. And people are generally interested. So I definitely recommend it. Sorry, lost my thread. I'm keen to encourage more people like me to get out recording, and find ways to help people on low incomes to help with equipment, stuff like things you need for specimen collections. I mean, they're not expensive, but when you add them up, it does add up. So if anyone's got any ideas or, ideas for projects, I had a discussion with Chris Raper. We've discussed it many times, about maybe putting together a little recording pack. It's just an idea at the moment, but just, a little pack to help people get started, because you don't really want to spend a lot of money if you don't know that you're going to be any good at it. So if anyone's got any ideas in that direction, I'd love to hear them. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Karen. Absolutely huge amount of response on the chat. There's a lot of empathy around little brothers and being nearly arrested during recording. And a couple of questions come through. I have one from Stephen Green. Is it a problem that people try to tidy up the really nice sites that you've recorded at?
Not really. I've not experienced that round here. It is quite a rough area. There are some groups that are interested in wildlife, but on the whole, other than the vandalism, I have not really found many sites being tidied up.
And what was the most difficult part of learning about bees independently? What when you were doing it using the internet, what were the most difficult bits to do that way?
It's probably the cost. One thing about, I've got quite a wide network of people who I can go to now, but in the beginning, I think one of the good things was you had to overcome obstacles yourself. You couldn't go to somebody and say, I'm stuck with this. Can you help me get past this step? I mean, you could post it online, but you didn't have somebody there to teach you. My biggest obstacle is the cost of texts and things like that, the various keys, because they are quite, some of them are outside of my budget.
Okay. Thanks very much indeed, Karen. I say there's a huge amount of comment in the chat that I'm really struggling to talk to and keep up with. But it'd be really good if you could go back on the chat and maybe respond to some of the people who've asked you questions that I haven't, or made comments that I haven't had a chance to say anything about.